we are kind of, if we're avoiding allopathic treatments, it doesn't mean we're saying, I don't want any treatment and I don't plan to do anything about it. Of course, each person has their own choice in how they want to deal with it. But my personal recommendation to patients when I'm warning them about some of the negative effects of allopathic treatments or medication treatments, I am by no means suggesting that we just sit back and do nothing. When we are addressing things from the natural perspective, there's hard work that is involved in that, but we're trying to see if there are alternative options that might not carry the same side effect risk. And that's really where my field of interest has been developing and growing stronger and stronger, is not just a push against medicine, a push against, the medical world. It is more just this quest for looking for solutions that really help the body, that work to enhance the body's healing mechanisms and not squash it. And at the same time, things that don't have, the same massive risk that many of the medications have that have been prescribed generally. And I think as we are delving deeper into this, another thing for us to remember is that we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. We are not able to discuss this topic in all its length and, at the level that is required to be able to say, once you've listened to all the talks in this particular summit, if you've listened to all 4 talks, you know how to treat cancer without using medication, and that's it. That's all you need to know. We can't say that because there's always more to learn. And even for me, as I mentioned, the more I study, the more I realize that there's always more for us to uncover. But we do know that God has blessed us with information, and my intent with sharing with you what I've discovered is not by any means to profess to have all the answers, but I'm keen to share with you what I've discovered because I have also seen, as Dana has also mentioned, in practice, in the feedback that we receive from patients, we have seen tremendous results. Now, I should also add here that since my interest has grown in lifestyle medicine and natural treatments, just by virtue of the people that have been contacting us, I cannot say that cancer has been one of the main areas that we've been dealing with. We have dealt with a lot more chronic other diseases, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol problems, autoimmune problems, and various other aspects. We have assisted patients with cancer, but I can't say, as I've said before, that I am now considered, or that I consider myself to be an expert at treating cancer naturally. What I'm sharing with you are principles that I've seen to really be applicable across a broad spectrum of diseases. And I've come to have less of a, let me put this carefully, I would not go as far as saying that cancer is just, every other disease, and that people who suffer from it are just dealing with the average problem. We are absolutely, I think the reason why we organized this summit is the recognition that this is a very serious and very difficult health problem for people to deal with. But I've come to learn that the treatments for cancer overlap with the way that we treat other diseases as well. And I'll share with you why I say that. So let me share my screen with you. I should just press the right buttons in order to do that. Perfect. So we have touched briefly on the remedies that God has kind of instilled in creation. And when I say remedies, we haven't really used that term for them thus far. We've spoken about the fact that these are the natural laws of health, if we can put it that way. But let me just quickly see if I move this up here. Is that a little bit better for seeing the slides properly?
Yes.
Yeah, we're not sure why that's there. That's kind of strange.
Let me just see if I do that. That moves it out of the way.
There we go. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. You can maybe just you can do the spotlight for me so that people can see my face, even though I can't see you guys.
Right.
All right. So we've spoken about how right in the beginning, when God created the world, he put certain laws of health in place. And these laws of health are laws that he has ensured for us to make sure that we have everything working harmoniously. Our bodies, as well as the bodies of animals and the whole plant kingdom, depends on the supply of oxygen and water and sunlight and all of these things. And humans in particular are absolutely dependent on the rhythms of rest healthful exercise, nutrition, and that is why I refer to these as the laws of health. But we have also addressed, very rightfully so, that there are connections with other things. And we are living in a world that is no longer in the perfect state that God created it. We are living in a tainted world. And Dana has very beautifully, I think, illustrated to us one of the key factors that can play a role. We have seen so clearly how these parasites can cause so much havoc in our bodies. And we're now moving on to addressing a couple of other factors. And we're going to be looking at what we can do while simultaneously zoning in a little bit deeper into some of the factors that we had mentioned briefly prior or before. All right, so we have addressed very briefly how those laws of health can be rearranged in this particular acronym, and we call it the New Start acronym. As I mentioned, there are others. And one of the things that has always stood out to me about this particular acronym is the fact that the word so beautifully puts it that we can make a new start. And we're going to mention a couple of things here that might make you, as you're listening to this, think, man, I haven't been doing this. You might be listening to some of this and thinking, I have been doing this. And as we said, there's so many different things that play a role that we might not be addressing all of them. But when we're talking about these particular factors, these are things that are oftentimes underestimated in their impact on not only preventing disease, but also how we can actually help the body to fight disease. And I think what we will do first is just revert back to figuring out, according to the Bible, what was the first account of disease in the Bible? Where did we first see disease actually emerging? And that actually occurs right in the beginning in Genesis chapter 1, 2, and 3. Chapter 1, we see how God created everything. Chapter 2, he mentions specifically that he set aside a rest day. Then he mentions a little bit more detail about, as we said, the ideal diet for man, the circumstances that he wanted them to be in the garden, to dress and to keep it. He gave them the choice of where to stay away from, explaining to them that there is a portion of the garden that he does not want them to go to, and he warned them why that was. And with that said, we see in chapter 3 that they had not given heed to this to the extent that they needed to. They actually moved out of harmony with what God had instructed them. And what this led to, according to the biblical account, is a description of what I believe to be the first incident of where the body started breaking down. We see that when they had actually moved out of harmony, out of obedience, their emotions started changing. They experienced anxiety, they experienced fear, they were worried about seeing God. And I believe that this was actually a description of how their body started changing. And we know that in today's life, it is also a well-known fact that our emotions have an impact on our physical health. Our emotions play into that. Stress and anxiety have very physical negative effects. And I think that this particular verse in Proverbs gives us a little bit of an insight into fighting disease that is sometimes overlooked. It says here, my son, give attention to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Do not let them depart from your eyes. Keep them in the midst of your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and health to all their flesh. This is just one example of a verse in the Bible that pertains to health. There are other verses that actually give similar insights and illustrate similar points. And what these verses have in common is a call back to God's original design, a call back to God's instructions, a call to living in obedience with what God has asked us and warned us about and what he's instructed us to do, but also an invitation to heed God's words. And God, with his words, created sunshine, good nutrition, all the greenery with which he provided our food. With his words, he created the light, the fresh air, and everything else that he made in the perfect scenario. And we're given these hints to revert back to harmony with those words. So we have already mentioned that these are factors that can influence disease. These are factors that can trigger disease processes. And these are different factors, not completely all-encompassing, if I can put it that way. These are not the only factors, but these are main contributors to cells that become abnormal, cells that develop abnormally, cells that develop unchecked or unbraked. And the cancer process is just an example of how these factors influence the body. So when we are trying to find solutions, when we're trying to find treatments, it is wise, I believe, to go back to these factors and try and see how we can correct them. And one of the ways in which we can do that is by looking at them one by one. And let's do that briefly for the moment. We have mentioned about blood acidity being a problem when it comes to creating an environment that enhances the growth of cancer. And I think Dana illustrated this so beautifully. Parasites are part of those factors that affect blood acidity. They are part of the different possible triggers that create an environment that makes it easy for cancer to grow. So when we're addressing blood acidity, one of the key things that I would mention here is to pay very special attention to toxins, and we're going to come back to that in a few moments. We have spoken about the necessity for good oxygenation and addressing poor blood circulation. And this is something that is very easily, and when I say easily, maybe that's not the right term, theoretically, it's easily addressed by exercise. On a practical level, exercise is one of those things that we often struggle with more than anything else. But healthful exercise, regular exercise, always has a benefit effect on boosting blood oxygen levels and also improving the blood circulation. So it's not enough for us to get extra oxygen going into the blood. We have to circulate that extra oxygen and good nutrients throughout the blood, throughout the whole blood circulation and to every cell in the body. And if there are areas in the body that are affected by cardiovascular disease, if there are areas where the blood vessels have actually become damaged based on long-standing damage, increasing blood circulation to those areas is oftentimes done exclusively only through increasing exercise. There are areas in the body where the nutrients simply cannot get there. The oxygen cannot get to those areas. And cancer is one of those areas. Cancer is known for the fact that in a cancerous growth, the blood circulation is quite poor in that cancerous growth. So we want to do everything that we possibly can to enhance blood circulation, and exercise is one of the ways in which we can do that. Exercise also forces circulation into areas where blood vessels have not only constricted based on damage, but where blood vessels have actually become completely blocked. The exercise or a regular exercise routine can help to push blood circulation into those areas. But here is a key factor that is often forgotten, and that is that regular exercise, and when I mean regular, I mean regular exercise, and exercise that pushes us beyond the point where we are comfortable. Exercise where we are becoming out of breath, exercise that pushes us to the point of sweating, exercise that boosts the blood circulation by also increasing the heart rate. That kind of exercise actually triggers a process called neovascularization. Now, the big word is not important, but what is valuable to know is that your body can actually form little new blood vessels that bypass blocked blood vessels to improve blood circulation to areas that have, by damage or over a long-standing period of time, has been depleted of good blood circulation. So exercise is a powerful remedy, not only from the preventative side, but also from the treatment side. What happens to cancer when we boost blood circulation, when we boost oxygen levels? It actually helps to deliver factors to that tumor that are able to kill off those cancer cells. But what happens in addition to that is that the cancer cells denature just in the environment of a alkaline blood, of well oxygenated blood. They don't thrive in that kind of environment. Let's put it that way. So regular exercise helps to change the environment to an environment where the cancer does not thrive. The other thing that we spoke about, and we're grouping these two together, growth factors and hormones, are factors that we want to address specifically when it comes to treating and addressing triggers. And one of the easiest ways to do this is by removing the extra growth factors and extra growth hormones that we actually get via our diet. And this is predominantly something that we take in through dairy and animal products. Now, when I say this, I know that people's hair usually stands on end, and most of us, many people don't like to hear that it's a good idea to cut out animal products. And this is in particular something that has become an issue of dispute because there are so many pushes for the keto diet and for the Banting diet and for the carnivore diet when it comes to cancer treatments. There are studies that show that when people go onto those diets, that they have improvement in their health. The main reason why that happens on a short-term basis is because when they start on those diets, typically speaking, they're also cutting out other things. They're cutting out sugars, they're cutting out processed foods, and typically on a short-term level, there will be some improvement. However, animal products, both meat, eggs, dairy, milk, all naturally contain growth hormones and growth factors, even if it is organic products. And I'm going to emphasize this. Many people are under the impression that organic milk or organic eggs, organic cheese, organic yogurt does not have a problem because it's an animal that has not been fed with growth factors and things that enhances their growth and things like that. However, number one, the regulations in many countries allow for meat or eggs or milk to be labeled, produced, and sold as organic or free-range products, even if that animal has received the growth factors, have received antibiotics and various other growth hormones, as long as it's a certain duration away from the date of slaughter or the date of sale. Which means that, for argument's sake, there are certain countries, and I'm not going to mention names here because the regulations, number one, they do change from time to time, but also because this is not an attack on specific countries. But there are places where eggs, for instance, can be sold as free-range eggs, even if those chickens were let out of their enclosures for as little as 2 hours in every 24-hour cycle. That is shocking, to say the least. There are countries where if growth hormones and antibiotics were not given to the animal, I think more than a month before the slaughter date, that animal's meat can be sold as organic meat or as free-range meat or something along those lines. So that in itself set aside, even if we look at animals who are home farm animals, homestead animals, it's my chickens, I've risen them or looked after them since their birth, and now I'm trying to evaluate whether their eggs are healthful or not. We have to keep in mind the natural process as well. Eggs in its most natural form contains a whole lot of growth hormones and growth factors because that egg is designed to ensure that the chick will grow as quickly as possible to adulthood. In its most natural form, milk is full of hormones, and growth factors to ensure and help the calf to grow. So those growth hormones and growth factors are naturally occurring in animal products, and they naturally cause abnormal tumor cells or cancer cells to grow faster. This has been proven in multiple studies. The China study is just one example of where massive amounts of people have been tested and where it has been shown without any reasonable doubt that when people reduce their intake of animal products, the rate at which their cancer grows actually slows down. And the long and short conclusion of this is that animal products enhance cancer growth. It speeds up cancer growth over and above some of the studies that actually show that those animal products contain things that trigger the cancer to grow. Parasite connection is a strong one in here because of the fact that so much strong evidence exists for parasites being transmitted through meat eating. It is a strong cancer connection. But we've seen that there are multiple different ways in which animal-based products can contain toxins that increase cancer growth. So there's a lot more that can be said about this. And for those who want to learn a little bit more about the differences between plant protein and animal protein, for instance, we have a video on our YouTube channel that explains a little bit about this. There are various studies that I can share, and we will show you an example of this where you can also learn a bit more about that. In the interest of time, we will not be delving more deeply into this right now, but let's move on to looking a little bit at what can be done then. Once we've understood a little bit more about how these particular factors are things that we are actually exposed to on a regular basis, what can be done? I want to present to you the principle of addressing the balance. And when it comes to addressing the balance, when we are talking broadly about basic principles for treating and reducing cancer growth, reducing cancer risk, I'm a firm believer of the fact that we need to address both the things that need to be reduced as well as the things that need to be increased. So we want to increase the healthy exposure to healthy nutrition, healthy exercise, being well hydrated. Dana also mentioned in some of her slides that all of these things also play into other problems, like addressing the problem with parasites, addressing the problem with bile flow and liver function. So we want to increase our adherence and living in harmony with the laws of health that God has created, while at the same time we want to decrease things that increase acidity of the blood, things that rob us of oxygen, things that reduce good blood circulation, and things that have abnormal growth factors and growth hormones. Toxicity, we want to reduce. Those things that are healthful, we want to increase. And I'm mentioning this because it doesn't help that we spend 3.5 hours talking about all the things that are toxic that we need to reduce if we don't understand that reducing those things is not enough. We have to address the things that have to be brought into balance. And I want you to keep this image of the scale in mind, because even if you don't remember the small detail that we're talking about today, it is a good principle to take home to keep the scale in mind. And every day, every choice that you make, everything that you're including in your daily routine, ask yourself, which side of the scale are you tipping? Are you increasing toxicity, or are you decreasing toxicity? Are you improving how well you're making use of the free resources God has given us and the healthful resources that He has created in nature? Or are we depriving ourselves of that? And we want to address both sides of the scale. Now, with that being said, when it comes to toxins, I always find it challenging to really share this in a presentation, because we can run through a very long list of toxins. And we are going to show in this presentation, and I'll show you on the next couple of slides, a few of the toxins that particularly play in with cancer. But there's more detail in this particular document, and we have a PDF document that is available to download for free from our website, or otherwise we will also, I'm pretty sure I can work with Bev so that we can link it in the description box for the recorded videos once it goes onto YouTube. But in this particular document, we don't only address remedies, but we also have a section where we go through a couple of the important details for addressing toxicity. Which are the toxins that we want to stay away from? There's actually so many, and people get overwhelmed when I share this, because I say, we are bombarded with toxins. This is not to overwhelm you. I'm not sharing this to bombard you with a sense of downcast emotions that make you feel this is a battle that we cannot win. On the contrary, when we read through this information, when we actually make ourselves aware of these toxins, there are many things that we can address and can change. Yes, there are toxins that we cannot address. There is exposure, and I mean, Dana shared her own testimony of eating organic food, eating her own homegrown foods, and yet at the same time finding that she had levels of toxic materials in her bloodstream that she didn't even know where she got exposure to that. So our environment does privy us to get exposure to things that we don't want in our bodies. So not everything that we're addressing here is, in fact, none of what I'm saying is an attack on any listener to say, you have done this to yourself and you're just carrying the consequences of that. That's not what we're saying. We're saying here that we are exposed to many things that hurt us, and it is helpful for us to have knowledge about that so that we can address whatever is within our control. So if you want to learn more about the toxins than what we're going to cover in this presentation, you're welcome to have a look in that particular document. I'm very briefly also sharing with you some of the other resources, simply because our time is too limited to address all of this. There's an incredible documentary called What the Health. If you haven't seen that, that is a great one to watch. There's another one called Forks Over Knives, which also addresses some of the things that are a little bit difficult sometimes to understand, like some of the things that Dana touched on, that research is conclusive in certain areas, but sometimes that research is not actually published to the point that it's available to the general public. And these documentaries address some of those reasons. We're also not going to delve too deeply in some of the other factors, but we have a document called, or a summary document, health brochure called Washing Machine, and that gives a bit more information. There's also an excellent talk. In fact, there are many excellent talks related to this theme of the sun cure movement. And those are just helpful resources that you can have a look at afterwards. You'll see the presentation on YouTube, but you can also take a screenshot if you need to. And what I'm mentioning and highlighting in this is that there are things that we can do to boost our health, many different resources available, and take some time to have a look at these. I think, if I'm not mistaken, there will be a recording uploaded onto the Elijah's Ark Ministries YouTube channel that addresses the sun cure movement. And we have also done one on healthy diet, which is somewhat overlapping with the washing machine topic. So you'll get that on the channel as well. Now we're going to be looking a bit more at boosting versus suppressing. And I think this is going to address one of the questions we received earlier, and that was, what is the impact of immunosuppressants on cancer? Now, I want to say before going further that what I'm going to share now is controversial in the sense that I'm going to highlight some of the problems with allopathic treatment, but this is not an attack on allopathic treatment on any level, and neither is this an attack on anyone who chooses to use allopathic treatments. However, I do believe that sometimes people are not always informed about all the implications of different prescribed medications, and we're going to address a couple of those things. Immunosuppressants are very broadly available and very broadly prescribed, and people don't often realize what the implication is of that. And we don't have time to delve into it too deeply, but what I can share with you right now is that immunosuppressants suppress the immune function by reducing the immune system's response to what it detects to be harmful. Now, that can appear helpful because an overactive immune system or a dysregulated immune system, I don't know if that's a real word, I think I might have made that up myself, but that's the way that I see it. A dysregulated immune system is going to overreact to certain things, causing excessive inflammation, and that has multiple harmful effects. But it doesn't necessarily attack the things that need to be attacked to the degree that it should. And when the immune system becomes dysregulated, it doesn't fight what it's meant to fight, but it causes inflammation in the wrong ways. Immunosuppressants appear helpful in those scenarios. And an example of this is for diseases such as autoimmune diseases, where we're told that the body is attacking itself and the immune system has to be suppressed because all the joint deformities and the pains and the aches and all the symptoms are caused by the immune system doing what it's not supposed to do. And it's true, that immune system is dysregulated, but it's not always the wisest thing to completely suppress the immune function. What would be ideal is to get it to actually become well regulated so that it attacks those things that are harmful and stops attacking the body in itself, or stops overreacting to things that are not really harmful. And what we're looking at now is a list of things that actually suppress the immune system, but also dysregulates it. And we're going to touch on that in a moment a little bit more. These are just examples. We're not going to address each of them independently. Dana has mentioned a few of them. I'm highlighting a couple of others. And without reading all of them specifically, I want to highlight that each and every one of these components are things that most of us actually have regular exposure to. If you're eating the average diet, if you're eating some processed foods, if you're going to restaurants from time to time, if you are buying bread made in a factory, if you are breathing the air close to a city where there are cars and trucks and other traffic, if you have time periods where you're spending excessive time inside your home and you don't have sufficient exposure to proper sunlight, each and every one of these factors are things that most of us might have exposure to. And this actually answers, to a large extent, one of the questions that we've already received, which is that I haven't been drinking, I haven't been smoking, I haven't been using drugs. Why do I still get sick? We have more exposure to toxins than what we realize. And our encouragement to people by showing this list is not to say that, we can never win the battle. It is to help us, to make us aware of the fact that these things are in our environment, in our food, in our daily habits. And the quest should be, even though it is a difficult process sometimes, to actually eliminate as many as possible of these factors. The more we can move away from unhealthful things, the more we can avoid exposure to toxins, the more favorable we can create an environment in the body where our bodies can actually fight disease. Now that plays into a little bit more detail of the question that we had, which was, what are the roles of the immunosuppressants? Well, they just suppress the immune system. They stop it from working. Whereas if we can avoid the toxins, if we can avoid the things that overload the immune system, it actually frees up the immune system's capacity to correctly and profoundly attack the things that are harmful, such as cancer cells. And what we find in practice is that when people are able to, one by one, eliminate toxins more and more and more, their immune system becomes not overreactive, but more focused. It becomes more focused on attacking the things that are damaging. It becomes sharper when it comes to eliminating and helping to destroy parasites, eliminate harmful viruses and bacteria, which we've also seen there is a connection with cancer. It becomes sharper at clearing the body from harmful toxins if there is a balance. But if it's overloaded, if the rubbish bin is overfull, then the immune system just cannot keep up, and it struggles with the backlog to the point that cancer cannot really be attacked efficiently. Neither can other diseases be cleared out of the system properly when the immune system is overloaded to that extent. Now, this also ties in with one of the other issues, and I want to just quickly highlight two things on this list, and that is steroids and methotrexate. Steroids and methotrexate are commonly prescribed medications when people are having indications of an overreactive immune system, such as chronic allergies, severe allergies, autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, various conditions like that. Even things like eczema and skin problems, oftentimes steroids and immunosuppressing drugs are prescribed where the underlying factors are not addressed, such as parasites and poor liver function and just a general toxic overload. And when this happens, when people are given these medications, what happens is, number one, the real underlying factors are not necessarily addressed. And number two, the immune system is suppressed in the sense that it can no longer attack the things that are harmful, which means that it diminishes the immune system's ability to actually fight things like cancer cells or destroy things like cancer cells. And both steroids and methotrexate and chemotherapy are things that fall into that category. Now, let me clarify here. I'm not saying that everybody who decides to take cancer treatment from oncology departments in well-known hospitals is doing a stupid thing. People have to make their own decisions for what is the best in their circumstances. But I encourage people to pray about this, and I encourage people to just keep in the back of their minds that taking that medication, which, yes, will kill cancer cells, will also reduce your body's own inherent ability to fight not only cancer cells, but also to fight other diseases. And that is why when people are on chemotherapy or receiving cancer treatment, they become far more susceptible to infections and viruses and bacterial infections. It's why it's often recommended that they go into isolation, why they have to be separated from friends and family, because it is well known that when they take these medications, their risk of contracting other diseases increases. And that always raises questions in my mind as to, does that not also reduce their body's inherent ability to actually kill off the cancer cells? The long and the short of the answer is yes, it does. Those treatments, as much as they do kill cancer cells, do reduce the body's ability to fight the cancer internally. And what that means is that even if few cancer cells that I have in my body right now do get killed by that treatment, it means that my immune system is suppressed and might actually take years to recover from that suppression, to the point that it increases my likelihood of developing the same cancer again or developing other cancers. And I'm saying this, as I said, not to be controversial, but this is actually a scientific fact. So when you look at this picture, we are now going to be looking at a couple of natural remedies that can help. And we've actually already addressed one of the main things. And I want you to keep this picture in mind. This cake picture is a summary of what we need to understand when we look at natural or lifestyle treatments. And that is that herbal treatments and any natural remedy that we are going to talk about is the cherry on the cake, but it is not the whole cake. And if I give you a little cherry on a side plate and I tell you, here is your dessert, you're going to look at me funny, because one cherry is not exactly a very exciting dessert. When we really want to address these issues, we have to take the cherries on the cake, and the cake involves the lifestyle factors, the daily choices, and addressing the toxicity. Remedies can only do that much. They are not going to work on their own unless we actually remove the toxins. And I know that I've used a controversial picture, or an ironic picture, should I say, because we're looking at a picture of a cake, which is not exactly what I'm recommending that you should have. But when I'm sharing with you some of the things that can help to address health problems, I want us to have our cake and eat it. I want to think of us, or I want you to think of it like a cake, because we have to address all the factors. And they're difficult sometimes, but that is the reality. So we are not going to avoid talking about the remedies. We're going to talk about them, but we have to keep in the back of our minds that the bulk of the treatment is starving the cancer, removing the toxins, removing the things that have actually aggravated the cancer growth in the first place. And then we can complement that with the remedies that we will be adding. So what are some of these remedies? This is a summary slide, which is by no means comprehensive, and there's more information on our website. There's more information on Dana's website. Their channel has excellent resources, so please make sure to use these if you want to delve deeper into this topic. But to summarize a couple of remedies, hydrotherapy is a very powerful remedy that can help to boost the natural immune system function. It can help to enhance and regulate the immune system. So hydrotherapy, and these are examples of things that you can use. These modalities can help the immune system act more strongly against things that are harmful, but it actually helps it to calm down its overreactions. These treatments are never going to over exaggerate the immune system's action, and part of the reason why it doesn't do that is because they're difficult treatments to do, in the sense that it's hard work. It's hard work to do contrast showers and sweat beds and wash all the extra bedding and those sort of things. So we tend to not have the capacity or the time to overdo them, but they are gentle enough to help the body without doing damage. And that is what I really love about these treatments. Another example of excellent remedies that we can use is the application of compresses and poultices. Compresses help to deliver something into the body. Poultices help to draw things out. Charcoal helps to draw toxins out of the body. Potato poultices is another example. When somebody first told me that you can use a potato poultice on an abscess to help to treat infection, I thought they had lost their minds. I thought they were absolutely crazy, until I tried it, and it works more effectively. I've tried this over and over with our patients. It is more effective when combined with removing the toxins. And I'm going to emphasize this until you get tired of me, but it's always in conjunction with addressing the toxic factors to begin with. But in conjunction with those, potato poultices, charcoal poultices, onion poultices, I've seen them to be far more effective than antibiotics in many, many different cases. I'll come back to a little disclaimer on that in a minute. Herbal treatments, we have already mentioned some of them. Dana has mentioned the herbs that increase bile flow, that improve liver function. Those are things like dandelion, milk thistle. Then the other herbs here, like artemisia, is also a bitter herb. I don't know if Sutherlandia or cancer bush is something that is available in the United States or in Canada, but we have it commonly in South Africa, and it grows in particular in some of the areas where people struggle to garden, like in the dry regions. It is a profoundly bitter herb. It is more bitter and particularly disgusting than compared to artemisia or wormwood, but it is known to help with fighting cancer because of the fact that it increases liver function, improves bile function, helps to eliminate parasites, and it also enhances immune function. So these are just a couple of remedies that I'm mentioning. And the disclaimer that I want to add here is that when I'm suggesting these herbs, one has to be wise in using these. It doesn't say that if I have been given a diagnosis of cancer that I'm going to take Sutherlandia and wormwood tea every day, and then I think that is the sum total of my cancer treatment. With herbal remedies and natural treatments, Dana mentioned something in one of her talks, I think that was recorded many years ago, and it's always stayed with me. You've got to go big, you've got to go long, you've got to go hard. We have to use multiple modalities to help to support the body in multiple different ways. And we have to pay attention to the triggers. We have to eliminate the toxins. We have to stay away from those things. But when we do these things in combination, we are able to boost the system. We're able to boost the immune system's function. And some of these herbs actually have a cancer-killing property in and of itself, like oregano, and some of them directly, some of them indirectly. Many of them actually slow down cancer growth. Many of them actually cause cancer shrinkage directly and through indirect mechanisms. With all of that said, we're now going to take a break, and I don't know how I'm doing with time. I've actually lost track of how long we're supposed to talk, but we want to leave some time for questions on this. And after the break, we are going to talk a little bit more about just a starter, not the be-all and the end-all of how to implement this, but a starter plan of action, how to incorporate some of this into one's daily routine. So let me stop sharing my screen so that I can see what the questions are. And I think we can I think that
Right.
should do the trick.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Jade, for that additional information. What questions do we have? I know I saw some in the chat. Dana, you've got your hand up. Go right ahead. You can go first.
So I'm wondering, I have a naturopathic doctor that has like an exercise bike, and he puts an oxygen mask on, and it's supposed to be able to push oxygen deeper into your tissues. Is that something that sounds good to you? Does that help with making the body more alkaline, or just increasing the oxygen?
Good question. The machine that you're talking about, we have some similar machines in South Africa that are sold. Some of them are called ozone machines, or ozone, I've forgotten the other term that they use for it. And I know that people do some ozone treatments in like small little tents. Sometimes they have a little plastic box that they use for hydrotherapies and ozone treatments. Personally, I can tell you with all honesty that I have not had the time to research as deeply into this as I would have wanted to already. And I don't know enough about specific studies that show a specific effect of those treatments, but I'm not aware of any particular side effects of the ozone machines, and I'm not aware of any particular downfalls, other than the fact that sometimes it requires specific equipment, which is not always available in all areas and might be expensive in certain regions. But other than that, I'm not aware of any potential problems with doing the ozone treatments. What I do know, however, is that comparatively to the ozone treatments, I would still say exercise ranks a little bit higher than the ozone treatments. And yes, it does depend what people are able to accomplish. Like sometimes disease has caused significant damage to the point that somebody is already debilitated somewhat or bedbound to some extent, or their movement is reduced. And in those sort of senses, I would say that the ozone treatments or the oxygen machines and equipment might actually be a very helpful option. But I would say that wherever it is possible, I wouldn't use that as a replacement for exercise, because exercise has a whole different mechanism through which it actually pushes oxygen and enhances blood circulation. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it would definitely be in concert, like every other day, like treadmill one day, and this goes on a bike. You have to bike while you're taking in the oxygen, because they want your muscle oxygen to drop to, I don't know, the mechanics of it. But all right, thank you so much.
No problem. I'll quickly add to that I know that there are liquids sold that are sold as ozone liquids or ozone sprays or things like that. And I will say from the word go that I have no idea about the efficacy of that. I don't know if Dana has done any research in that. She might be able to answer some more in that line, but I'm not sure how effective those are.
Thank you for that question, Dana. How about coffee enemas? That's Valentina's asking that question.
Yeah. So when it comes to coffee enemas, there are various different opinions about it, and there are different schools of thought when it comes to the coffee enemas. One of the benefits that is often mentioned about the coffee enemas is the fact that it helps to clear the colon. It increases clearance of the content of the colon, and that in and of itself is a benefit. As Dana also mentioned, it is crucial to make sure that the funnel that she mentioned, which I think was a really great explanation, that funnel needs to not be blocked, and we want to make sure that we have good clearance of stool passing through the whole digestive tract. When we are constipated, that actually retains many toxins and increases the amount of toxins that are absorbed into the bloodstream. So we don't want that. We don't want constipation, and coffee enemas have been used in that line. But I know that coffee enemas are also used in connection with the liver. My personal opinion about that is that we have heard mixed reports from different people. We have heard about people who have experienced very clear symptoms that the caffeine in the coffee enemas is actually absorbed into the bloodstream. And there are various negative effects of caffeine in the bloodstream. We recommend very strongly that people abstain from caffeine. And for that reason, I would say that to some extent, this has to be a personal decision. But I personally prefer dandelion enemas or garlic and dandelion tea enemas, because that also increases liver function. It also enhances bowel flow, and it oftentimes has a similar effect on clearing the colon. I would say, though, as a disclaimer, I have not been able to research even more deeply into that than what I've shared now. So,
okay, I'm here now. I walked in right as you were addressing this, and I couldn't figure out how to get unmuted on my phone. I can address that a little bit more.
Yeah, sure.
I've done a fair amount of research, and I do know that the coffee enema increases glutathione production by up to 700%. So it really does increase glutathione, which, if you don't know what that is, that's the body's master antioxidant. And so it does have that benefit. The way that it works is different than drinking coffee. It does not have quite the same effect. It enters straight into the liver by the hemorrhoidal veins. And that's where it just triggers this massive dump of toxins. And part of that, excuse me, is through the glutathione. Yes, you do absorb some of the caffeine during the coffee enema. Most of the time, though, the thing that causes the, I don't know if you call it jitteriness or euphoria or what have you, as a result of a coffee enema, is actually probably due more to the glutathione rush than a caffeine rush. So again, I agree with Dr. Jade. This is something that you have to make your personal decision on, whether you're willing to have, a level of caffeine in your blood in order to get the benefit.
Dana, thank you so much for sharing that. And what I would then say would probably be a valuable follow-up question on that is how frequently you would recommend people use this. And I would assume that this is not exactly something that we recommend somebody does once a day as a general day-to-day, replacement for their cup of coffee. I would assume that it is as a treatment and not as a daily routine necessarily. What is your recommendation on how you would suggest that people use that?
That's correct. We use it as a rescue remedy when someone is having, for instance, like the lady that has the breast cancer or the lady that has the lymphoma that's actually on here. In those cases, I think that the coffee enema could have some benefit by really, really massively increasing bile flow, increasing glutathione, increasing the dump of these toxins. I know that in certain therapies like the Gerson therapy, they do them every day, sometimes several times a day for a short duration. But you do have to be careful with the coffee enema because it can become addictive.
And I think you've touched on exactly what plays into the personal decision people need to make on this is if they have a tendency to have a coffee addiction, if it's, for instance, and I'm sure that you would agree with me, Dana, that we don't recommend that people incorporate coffee into their daily life or caffeine as a general thing. So if I have been struggling, for instance, to come off of caffeine, if I've gone through a very tedious process of actually weaning myself off or stopping caffeine, and I'm convicted that I shouldn't go back there, if I've previously struggled with a caffeine addiction, then I might need to be extra cautious with this. And I'm also assuming from what you're mentioning is that the frequency of use and the scenario that I'm going to use it in is going to play into the decision-making process. The one other follow-up question I would ask about this is, for those who decide that they do not actually want to do the caffeine enemas, if say, for instance, I'm somebody who's had a tremendous struggle to get off of caffeine, and I don't want to expose myself to that potential back or fallback, are there alternatives, even though they might not be as profound in causing that particular effect on the body? Are there alternatives from a herbal perspective that you would say kind of is a second best option?
A lot of people are using the dandelion enema. I have not found as much research on the effectiveness of dandelion to cause the real bile flush and increase the glutathione. There are other ways to increase glutathione, and it's, you mentioned earlier, there's so much we could cover, so you can't really cover everything in this little talk. But, aside from the herbal interventions, if people are willing or in the need of something that is very powerful and yet safe, the TUDCA that we mentioned earlier. You can do what's called the TUDCA flush, where you take the TUDCA and then 30 minutes later you come and you do 2 back-to-back enemas. Typically they do the coffee enema back-to-back. You don't have to use the coffee enema. You can use the dandelion, or like you mentioned, even the garlic. But the TUDCA flush would be another effective way that you could do that. Many people, however, have found a lot of benefit just by using the dandelion.
Okay. I hope that helps to answer the question. There's, as you mentioned, there's lots more that one could say about it, and there's so many factors that influence somebody's personal decision. So it is difficult to answer it in full, but I hope that gives a bit of extra information.
Excellent.
Before we go on
Okay.
to,
Can I
Yeah,
ask
go ahead,
something?
Jade.
Can I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, sure.
You didn't mention berberine, and berberine is has many how do you say it, papers that show little research about the anti-cancer effects. Do you know something about berberine?
I am not sure I'm recognizing that name. If you want to, you can maybe just type it into the chat. And
Oh, I
will...
have. It's the A. Is there knowledge about berberine?
All right, I'm going to quickly have a look at. I'm just scanning through the messages.
Berberine, berberine. Yeah.
I'm not actually familiar with that, so it might be that we have it available in. Ah, there we go. We might have it available in a different form, or it might go by a different name here. But I would actually need to research that. I'm not familiar with it.
Berberine is the yellow, that what makes like golden seal yellow. It's also in Oregon grape.
Yeah.
You might not have Oregon grape, but out west in the western states of Canada, we have Oregon grape, which has berberine in it. But yeah, we've done a fair bit of study on Oregon grape, but not so much about anti-cancer effects of that. That'd be interesting to look a little bit more. But I mean, of course, golden seal is an amazing substance for a lot of different things. So.
Right. Yeah.
I actually have researched it with regard to cancer, and berberine is something that they've used for diabetics because it lowers blood sugar, which impacts cancer quite a bit. And it's also a pretty decent glutamine blocker, which is now they're finding another form of fuel for cancer. And it also has been demonstrated to kill cancer stem cells, which is absolutely key to getting rid of cancer. So it's kind of amazing.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Christy. And Christy, you had also mentioned about chamomile enemas, increasing bile flow.
Right. Not as much as coffee, but then you don't get the caffeine. So,
And if I may add quickly, like we're definitely touching on some very awesome remedy, different natural remedies, whether it's herbs and stuff. But yeah, there's a lot more that I mean, we really could have several seminars like this to cover. So I mean, there's a whole ton of stuff out there that we could delve into if we had enough time.
Exactly. We're gonna have to book some more time for these things, most definitely, because it's such an important topic. Rianne, I hope I pronounced your name right, says some fruit also contains sugar. Is it better not to eat sweet fruit to prevent cancer, or when you have cancer? Better to use lemon, grapefruit, for example, or she's asking.
That is a very, very good question. And I think it brings us to something that I would highlight at this point. And that is that it is very, very difficult to share general principles sufficiently in a summit like this that is actually going to allow for somebody to have all the tools they need to fight their cancer on a natural level. And I'm a firm believer of the fact that God has made information available to people to the extent that most of us can look after our health without needing to consult healthcare professionals necessarily. It doesn't mean that we should never go to healthcare professionals, but I am firmly of the belief that living in harmony with God's laws of health that He has created, generally speaking, is profoundly health protective and eliminates a lot of the unnecessary healthcare professional consultations that we often end up needing. But what I would say is that especially because we're in an era where natural treatments are not necessarily as commonly well known and so freely available as maybe in previous centuries, I would say that if you are struggling with a cancer problem, it might be helpful to work with either a personal coach or a healthcare professional who knows and has been studying into the natural remedies. Because, as was mentioned through this question, there are questions like, what foods are going to aggravate it? And we've spoken about some of the toxic things, but there are things that are even healthy foods that may need to be eliminated on a short-term basis to give the body an even better boost. So for our cancer patients, for example, I do recommend that they actually eliminate sweet fruits for a period of time, not because those sweet fruits are inherently unhealthy, but because the excess of sweetness might actually help to fuel the cancer. So it might be good to adapt that, or adapt the diet a little bit, or change the diet. And sometimes people have a practical challenge with doing that. So then it's helpful to work with coaches who are familiar with protocols and are, have enough recipes and resources available to support that process. I think I would add one more thing to the previous question, and that is there are many, many studies that show the cancer fighting benefits of certain components of herbs and certain components of food. Beta carotene is another example, very well-known example that has been shown to be helpful. However, there are studies that show that in the extracted form, those nutrients or cancer fighting components might not have as much of an effective effect to fight the cancer, but there are even studies that suggest that in the extracted form, it might have the opposite effect to what we were hoping. So as a general rule, whenever it is possible, and I agree with Dana that sometimes it's not always possible. Sometimes we have to do the best with what we have, and sometimes some synthetic things or certain alternative options may need to be used. But wherever it is possible for us to do that, incorporating herbs or foods that contain a cancer-fighting component, but having that food or herb in its whole food form, even if it's dried or powdered or whatever, is usually the preferred option and is a much safer option than the extracted forms. Because without delving into this more deeply, there are potential risks to the extracted form. And it always reminds me that God has created things in a perfect recipe. When he placed beta carotene in a carrot, it comes with the exact nutrients and minerals and vitamins and enzymes that help the body to make use of that to the best. And when we extract it, we can never improve on God's recipes. Let's put it that way.
And amen. Dr. J, do you have some specific essential oils that you like for cancer?
Yes, and when it comes to essential oils, I'll very briefly mention one has to be careful with essential oils. They are very strong. They're a very concentrated composition, if I can put it that way, of the medicinal properties in a plant. So they can be quite strong. Please make sure that you do your research as to how to use them safely, to not burn your skin. Or, yeah, I've learned this the hard way by experimenting on my family members. My husband is also willing sometimes to take some of my recommended prescriptions. And for instance, if you put too much oregano essential oil in the steamer, there's a significant reaction complaining of the burning sensation. And then, of course, my reaction is, don't be so silly, man. It's not so bad, until I put my face in it and sniff it myself and realize it's really, really bad. So with essential oils, use them with caution, use them safely, study out the different ones. But I'll just use a few examples. Oregano is known to fight cancer because of the fact that it also fights the viruses and the bacteria and other things that can aggravate and enhance the favorable environment for cancer. So oregano essential oil might be useful. It's one of the strongest essential oils and one of the ones that I would say probably is important to use the most caution with so that you don't burn easily. Frankincense has been known to shrink cancer. And I would again say all the remedies are in conjunction with living according to the laws of health, addressing the toxic factors and those sort of things. But when we do them in the right balance, then something like frankincense has been used. I know, for instance, with frankincense, they massage frankincense into the temples and put frankincense on a finger and then massage it into the soft palate inside the mouth. and that is used for brain tumors, and it has been shown to help to shrink brain tumors in conjunction with the other factors. So yes, there are essential oils that have been shown to do that. I think when it comes to essential oils, what one has to make sure that you do is check it, test it on yourself, and double check the particular form and the modality that you will use it in.
Hold on, didn't mute it. Okay. What is your thought for using rebounders, please, for exercises?
Yeah, I can't say anything bad about a rebounder, except if you don't have good balance, then be careful, or get the rebounder that you actually have the handles for. Any person with a history of falling easily does not mean that you should not use the rebounder. On the contrary, it's actually part of fall prevention because it increases muscle strength, muscle tone, and balance sensations in the brain. So rebounder is excellent in all those conditions, but just use it safely. Make sure that you can't actually fall off it. It improves lymphatic drainage. It improves blood circulation. It's got a lot of benefits. Absolutely.
Fantastic. Leanne, are you on still? Leanne had two questions from before. Leanne, do you want to unmute yourself and share those questions? Leanne Williamson? Or let's see. Oh no, did she? There she is. Okay. Yeah. Or did you want me to share them for you, perhaps?
I think you're muted. You're muted.
Yeah. Leanne, you're muted still. Just Leanne and Doug, if you can unmute yourselves down in the bottom left corner of your screen.
There you go.
There you go. Okay, go ahead.
My techie husband. Yes, if I guess it's I have some concerns, and I first of all, I have precancerous skin sores or lesions, and the second is that when I had a colonoscopy 5 years ago, I have one fairly regularly. I had polyps, which were removed, and I have another appointment soon for another colonoscopy. But I have a friend who told me, and I don't know whether this is accurate, that if you have cancer, something cancerous, and they cut it, then the cancer spreads. And I don't know if that's reality. I haven't dug into that yet, but I'm just asking your professional help for suggestions.
Thank you for sharing that. I think one could probably spend a lot of time answering that question, but the short answer to the question is that when they cut to remove any cancerous growth, it does not always trigger it to spread. And I can really say that with experience in the hospitals, it does not always trigger spread. And I have heard of many, many people who have had cancerous growths removed surgically, where I'm very glad that they did, because either the tumor was very big, it was compressing, it was causing complications, or it just solved the issue because it was actually removed. So I'm not against surgery per se. But what I can also add is that it depends. There are certain locations where tumors can develop where the surgery might actually potentially increase the potential that it grows. And that is related to the fact that when we're looking at a tumor, and I won't show a picture now specifically for that, but when we're looking at a tumor, they're typically speaking, they're not always well circumscribed. You do get tumors where when you palpate them, for instance, with a breast lump, you might be able to feel a very nice little round ball. But it doesn't always work that way, in the sense that there could be tentacles. There could be like spider-like processes that grow where those cancer cells are starting to push outside of the boundary of the main tumor. And those are not always visible to the naked eye. So those are the reasons why it is sometimes thought of and why there are questions and concerns about surgery. And I would say that it really depends. And I think one has to ask your oncologist and your surgeon very honest and open questions to say to them, how convinced are you that for this particular tumor that that you can cut it out, with sufficient size? It also depends on the location. There are areas where, I'll take an example. If it's a space where the skin is very loose and they want to remove a tumor from the skin, there's techniques that they can use to remove that cancerous growth and actually bring the skin together nicely and just close it off, no problem. But there are other areas in the body where removing of the tumor means that there's actually a gap in tissue that they can't bring back together. And to make the surgery practically possible, they have to cut away as little as possible, which increases the risk that they actually don't clear the margins completely. So the technical aspects of it do play a role. And what I would say to anybody who's considering surgery is, if you have the option to postpone, I'm not saying cancel the surgery, to postpone surgery and actually follow a very powerful, very structured immune boosting protocol. If you're able to do lifestyle factors for a time period before the surgery, it just increases your body's resilience. It increases your resilience regarding the actual procedure, but it also allows for your body to potentially mop up some of those tiny little cells that are already projecting out of the main tumor. It's not a guarantee, but I would always say that it's the best option to do before your surgery.
Okay. As I say, these are polyps, so they're precancerous, I guess, maybe. I don't really know. And
That's
then
correct. The risk is definitely lower with polyps. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then my skin lesions from years too much sunshine. We're farmers, and when I was young as well, and I'm just about 65, so so much skin exposure to the sun has caused these precancerous lesions, and they try to burn that off, and I'm not sure if that's helpful, but yeah. Do you know anything about that, or could you point me in a direction where I might find more information?
Sure. What I'm going to answer is controversial because there are different schools of thought on this, but Bevan, and on their channel, they've actually recently had an interview with a gentleman who spoke about the sun cure movement. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't think that particular talk is uploaded yet. That's still coming. But there are, shall we say, to put it basically, there are many, many, many different people who have started picking up on various research studies that the link that is typically made between skin cancer and sunshine is not actually the right link. And all I can say is that the immune system and toxins on an internal level play a much, much, much stronger role in development of cancer, even skin cancer, than overexposure to sun radiation. In fact, there are some studies that seem to suggest that skin cancer is treatable by increasing sunshine. So I would say, again, as we've mentioned, the starting point for me when it comes to dealing with any disease is trying to see how can we address the base factors. And my first priority always is to see how can I assist somebody, either through a structured coaching program or through sharing free resources. How can I get somebody onto a path of looking thoroughly through the list of toxins and eliminating them as far as is possible? Because when we're able to eliminate toxins, the body's own ability to actually start killing off those cancer cells just enhances. And we have actually had patients, for instance, following an elimination protocol, which we do in a specific coaching program, who have reported improvement in their skin, having not used any other treatments other than actually being on this particular elimination protocol, which is just a process of clearing toxins. So, yeah, it's not a guarantee, but I would say keep researching on that one.
Yes.
If I may add quick, one thing that I think is really important, the author of the Sun Cure video, one thing that he mentioned, I think it was toward the end of the presentation, that he mentioned that it's very vital that a person is eating a very clean diet while doing that, because if they aren't, they actually can get damage from the sun. But the diet is super important to actually get the benefits.
And also in that vein, we had to postpone his presentation So Randy's talking about
that's
a
right. I
previous one
forgot.
that we had done. Yeah, so that one's coming up on May 4, I believe, Monday evening, May 4. Okay.
And
That's
one
super.
other thing in regard to suspicious looking moles, etc. I actually got one on my I've been a gardener. We've been doing farming for the last 8 years, getting lots of sun, and that's so it was about 8 years ago that I got the suspicious looking mole. Yeah, we were doing it for 11 years. But anyway, and it was on my back and had the hallmarks. I never went and got it checked out because it just but just all of a sudden appeared. I didn't, I had it there before, and but then it didn't do anything for years. But then last winter, actually, it all of a sudden started doing stuff, and it was right at that time where it just started growing. It was also being much more raised, and it was very regular shaped. It had all the hallmarks just from doing my own research of being not a good thing at all. But right at that time, I'm not sure if any of you are part of the Med Missionary Group on Facebook, where there's a guy named Chris Chung on there, and he shared this a poultice that he when he was helping at some health lifestyle center that they were using there and he gave this testimonial to this guy. He was stage 4 malignant melanoma, and he applied this, and I think it was within 30 days, it completely disappeared, and it was very large. He had multiple moles, on him, and so I started applying that poultice. I quickly ordered the stuff, and I started applying it, and it was amazing. Within 2 days, it was already shrinking. It was at the size, initially it was about 3/8 of an inch diameter. And within a couple days, it was starting to shrink. Within 2 weeks, it was completely gone.
Wow.
I mean, this isn't any kind of caustic thing. It's just, there is a black salve that you can apply, but that really just burns the tissue, burns it out. This is actually just healing. It has, we'll put the ingredients in here for whoever wants to do their own research and wants to. The ingredients are comfrey, chaparral, slippery elm, and golden seal are the 4 ingredients. And it was just a miracle to me the way it worked. And I mean, it won't do anything to a regular mole. It will, it was just a healing thing. It's not caustic. But if it's something that's suspicious, Chris Chung, he said he's seen it work on many people. It's just it always works for him anyway. So yeah.
And we'll include that recipe and the directions in the newsletter, so you can keep an eye out for that.
That would be great.
Amazingly well on him.
Yeah,
and
you might want to put in this part here. Just the instructions. That's pretty easy. Yeah.
Any other questions?
If I can maybe.
Yeah.
I wanted to just briefly add to what you're mentioning there about the poultice and recognize, and I just want to acknowledge the fact that we haven't really been sharing all that many very specific cancer treatment recipes, if I can put it that way, when it comes to natural remedies. And the reason for that is I'm sure that just in this group here, the questions are related to various kinds of cancers. So some may have questions about skin cancers and some may have questions about breast cancers. And the remedies do sometimes vary a little bit depending on what cancer we're treating with. But it's really wonderful to share. And I would also love to just get that recipe for the ones that you're using, because the more we get exposed to different recipes of natural treatments that are used for different people, the more easily we can kind of start to assemble a plan of action for ourselves. And the one beautiful thing about most of these natural remedies is that you can actually experiment with them. And I say that knowing that there are unwise ways to use these things. So I'm not saying that people should go and be, completely ridiculously cowboy daring, but natural remedies allow for a little bit more flexibility to experiment, because you're not dealing with all the side effects that you typically get with your chemical things. So one can try a couple of things, and you can try a remedy for a week or two, and if you see, well, it doesn't look like it's doing anything. It is important, however, to add one added principle, and that is that some remedies do take time. Castor oil is one of them that is known to be very good for different kinds of cancer problems, but it is very gentle. It's slow acting. So for castor oil, you can't try it for 2 weeks and think, oh, there's nothing, so I must just stop it. It's one of those that you have to persist with. So most of the remedies, you can't do damage by using it, but you have to kind of use your discretion and do some research in terms of how quickly you should expect to see a result.
I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, guys, it's 5-2. Dr. Jade has one more presentation to give to us. We're going to finish around 3 o'clock. So why don't we take 5 minutes to get ourselves rejuvenated, refreshed, and we'll come back. Actually, 4 minutes. Actually, 3 minutes. It's 1:57. You got 3 minutes, guys. Come back in 3 minutes and Dr. Jade will finish up. Thank you for being here thus far. All right, 3 minutes.